His name is Jared Ficklin. I would love it if you could give him a big welcome. Come on, guys. There we go.
Thank you. Oh, and thank you for the clicker. Happy to be out here. Spatial computing has arrived. Maybe a year or two ago when we launched Magic Leap 1, the Creators Edition, and it makes me realize that I did not waste my life reading science fiction. Because since, for the past year, I've been spending a lot of my time making the things from these books actually real. And before that, I spent about 20 years in product design just trying to get little slivers of them to be real. And so we really do live a digital lifestyle. Everyone here knows that more than anyone else. We immerse ourselves into our phones so deeply, we will literally fall into a pond while using them. I noticed that it didn't play for Omar, so I threw it in real quick. That's what happens when you show up early. But I see this a little differently as a product designer. Like, first of all, the immersion is real. When you look at your device, you're engaging a part of your brain that was developed out in the Serengeti plain to spot lions in the brush. It's a biological imperative. You start going to a pattern scanning recognition form. You literally close out the rest of the world and you go into a flight and fight response. It never stops being funny, by the way. To me as a product designer, this is a value statement. Like, it might be counter-evolutionary. People will literally risk their lives to practice their digital lifestyle. And when I look at that, I'm like, ooh, might be onto something there, right? But perhaps the form is wrong. What we really want is an integrated reality. We want all the productivity, entertainment, and socialization of our digital lifestyles to join us in the real world, and now it can. With this integrated reality, it's quite the opposite of what we say about augmented reality. Augmented reality is, oh, maybe I could take that physical object and put some digital information on it. Yes, that's going to happen, but what we really want is our digital lifestyles to join us in reality. And to do this, we need to move computing out into the real space. And when we do that, we start recognizing certain values. One is the obvious one, the ability to mark up the physical world. I call this the Uberization of the bar. So you can put your drink out there and it says what drink you want, and then they'll fill it up for you. You don't have to wait in line while they serve everyone more attractive than you. We can put interfaces everywhere without retrofit, without renovation, and we can do it in a calm manner where when they disappear, it is just the wall again. We can allow the objects in our environment to participate in our digital world. They can actually become UI controls if we want them to. And this way it answers the question of how do I have a huge interface, which we'll talk about more. The digital can integrate so fully that it accommodates the real world as well. And once you reach that level of integration, you start building a brand new reality. A very important value around this that will be recognized is this gives us the opportunity to beat that biological imperative and be heads up and present in our environment around us. No longer closing out our coworkers, our friends, or our families. We're able to compute in a way that we still have our peripheral visions. And then one of the ones I am most personally excited about is the ability to build cooperative interfaces. For far too long, we have been locked into a personal pattern of computing, and that pattern is not going to go away, but finally we're going to be able to add another layer to it, and that layer is a cooperative pattern of computing where we are all using the same interface to the same computer at the same time, rather than being 7 people with 7 copies of Yelp open trying to pick a restaurant together. Here's an example of such an interface and how it kind of changes things. This is just a thing we put together. It's a family planning a trip to Disneyland. Right? And instead of all 4 of them looking at their own computers at their own pace, they're working on this together through a map of the park. And they're able to schedule the rides and the time slots that they want to use for their magic bands, and they do it together. They're able to make negotiations together. They're able to launch searches together. They're able to agree on the order and reorder, and when they're all finished, they submit their things together. Done. There's a happy family, right? And of course, we can be playful. We can be far more playful in integrated reality than even regular reality or in regular computing, because how broadly combined it is. The way we're doing this is by augmenting our human capabilities, by adopting a computer that works the way we do. It has its own sense of vision, it has its own sense of voice, And in doing that, we're able to digitize the world, and the room itself becomes the next multifunction computer. And this begs the question, how do you interact with a room? And it's a very important question, because for 60 years we had computers, and they were the place of specialists until the Windows metaphor came along and it opened it up to the masses. And for 10 years we had feature phones, and they were the stuff of business professionals, and until iOS and the model came along and expanded the model. And the same thing is true of spatial computing. There's going to be a model, an interaction model for spatial computing that's going to speak to the most people, and that pattern of computing is going to become dominant. One of the ways to achieve that is to go ahead and use a human input model, okay? So let's examine how we interact with the real world as humans, and then examine how that can happen with integrated reality. So we naturally divide the world into placeable objects and surfaces to place them on. We scan any kind of room, and that's what we do, along with recognizing people. And so the Magic Leap 1 device is able to map the environment and begin to identify surfaces and objects as well. And this means we can interact with that digital world the same way we do with the physical world. We can look, grab, and place. And you're able to do that in several ways. With the controller, you can just, or with your hands, you can just reach out through gesture recognition, identify objects, and literally involve the interface. But we also have controls, because we as humans are tool-using creatures, and we benefit a lot from putting things in our hands that extend our reach, extend our speed, and extend our power. So the Magic Leap 1 comes with this control. This control has 6 degrees of freedom, touchpad, and a few buttons, and an interaction model that lines up with it perfectly. And with that control, you can also just look, grab, and place. Often you use array to do that. Sometimes you'll reach right in with the control itself, look, grab, and place. The trigger is naturally a grab. We're going to do some questions at the end for sure. How do we interact with computers? We're going to look, swipe, and select. This is a model that's been building up for the last 60 years, and it's the one that's become the dominant pattern, so much so that we've made it literal with touchscreens, where you literally look, tap, and swipe, and select with objects. And there's moments in augmented reality where we shouldn't forget that this is digital and there's computing. And you also just want to look, swipe, and select. And this is great for very low friction moments where you're trying to go through lots and lots of content. So look, swipe, select, look, grab, and place, but that won't be the end of it, because we also will have entirely new interfaces, and those are going to need a combined model that Omar alluded to. This is a multimodal model, one that combines voice, gesture, gaze, eye control all together, working together, and that's not a trivial problem to solve. But what it does is create a very intuitive model for the consumer. I call it conversational computing. Right? If I were to say, turn out the lights, everyone knows that someone in this area is supposed to turn out the lights. It's because nonverbal communication told us so. And when you teach the computers to recognize nonverbal communication along with verbal communication, you get that kind of interaction model. Looks something like this. This is some old work, and it won't be too long before you're just doing this in the Magic Leap 1 devices as well. The audio's not coming through, so I'm going to narrate it myself. I said, turn on the lights. I said, turn on that light. I said, turn on this light. I'm going to say, turn on these lights. And then I'm just going to wave at them with gestures. Because the computer was watching where I was pointing, it was able to interpolate the context and do the correct action. And now I didn't have to learn a command-based language. That would go something like this: computer, turn off light 1. Which fails because people don't want to sound like Jean-Luc Picard all the time. And also because you'd have to memorize everything in your room and all the commands that are possible of it. This pattern is intuitive because of social mimicry. It works the way humans do, right? So if you're just going to pick up a tool, you can just pick up the tool we do in the room. And what this does is allows us to make far more intuitive interfaces. It also allows us to do immensely playful things. Computer vision, gesture recognition in the augmented reality space makes for amazingly playful things. And it is a human model. All right. If you guys want to have some fun ever, just go onto Shutterstock and put in augmented reality. You get tons of stuff like this. It's really, really fun. So who's going to be the first movers in this space in terms of business? Well, one, on an enterprise layer, if you're someone who's beginning to deal with big data and insights and you have dark data, sometimes it's going to be very useful to overlay that data in a real world situation. We often see it like this, but I think almost more curiously, it would be better like this. Imagine you were a maintenance supervisor or a traffic control officer in a hospital. Doors are a very big problem because they have opacity, but they can be marked up with information that's very important, such as what doctors are behind this door, or if there's an operation in session, or if the door is impeded or not, or where the battery is on that automatic door opener. Anytime you look around your business and you see people looking at a screen and then looking at the real world and looking at a screen and looking at the real world, this is a place that mixed reality is going to make a real big difference in your world. Anytime you look out on your shop floor and you see 3 or more monitors stacked up at once, right there you even have a capital cost curve. Right, you're spending a lot of money for 5 virtual monitors that are very rigid in their display and they're fixed. But these had Magic Leap 1 and these devices can actually put infinitely many screens in space and they can be moved around and shuttled very quickly. Communication suffers from the same problem. Telepresence has a very formal veneer for it and it's not going to go away. But it ends at that veneer. And when you get into virtual reality telepresence, you start getting back into collaboration. You can pick a wall and turn it into a whiteboard. You can pick a table and turn it into slides. And you can begin working on that stuff together. So it takes a meeting and it turns it into a scrum. And it allows you to be collaborative and cooperative in your interfaces. We've all been in that meeting where 7 people have the dock open on 7 machines and it's a slow train wreck. More awesome imagery, startups. What kind of startups, I just thought I'd riff real quick, what kind of startups are going to emerge very early on around this type of technology? Well, experiential is already off and running. Your marketing department wants to know about this, or if you're a small agency, it's something you can move into. This is work done by Red Paper Hard out of New York for CES this year, where they helped Harley Davidson debut their new electric motorcycle. You put on the device, and what was on the screen actually went past you. The screen was very important because not everyone could wear devices, but if you had the device on, it was amazing, and it would stay in real-time speed with the throttle. That way they didn't have to have people riding around on the showroom floor. There's gonna be a lot of companies that spawn up around collaboration because of this reason that we talked about earlier. Everyone from doing medical consultations to previewing 3D files together is going to happen. And it's very interesting because you can have a 2 truths model here. What I mean by 2 truths is that in this map here, we're seeing the camera's view, and the map is facing us, but every one of the participants here has a choice of whether to see the map from the opposite side or actually see the map from their side while keeping it in sync. That's like just absolute magic right there. It takes it's the kind of science fiction that actually takes being together and improves upon it. Digitizing, mapping, measuring, inventory, identifying. It's a computer vision device that's wearable and that can infer from where you're looking on what's an important context. Location, test fitting, measuring, caching, wayfinding. This is a really interesting concept that came out earlier this week on Twitter by Tosolini.com, where you can pull out the layout of a home just like a drawer and inspect it in a kind of a Sims God mode. And training. These are the astronauts for the International Space Station that have been using Magic Leap 1 in certain training protocols that allow them to see things deployed in environments that they don't. And of course, gaming is going to be massive, and lots of old companies are already in this. I don't mean old, but a lot of established, well-known gaming companies are already in this space, and there's going to be some startups that figure out exactly what's really, really adorable and engaging. Well, I wanted to end there because I wanted to make sure we had some time for some Q&A, because I heard that out here at MWC and 4 years from now, Q&A is a very popular thing. Omar was going to join me, but the Financial Times pulled him away to interview him, and you don't say no to the Financial Times. So I know there was one question. Let's get it started. Over here, we had a question. Just we'll get audio here. Just raise your hands. He'll go over.
Is this working, mate? Who's got a question? Who's got a question?
Over here, she's next then.
I'll hold it.
Can I stand? I don't like sitting and talking. Okay, thank you very much. I mean, In all the beautiful pictures, there are no people with devices on their heads. Yet, when you come back to the reality, everyone has devices. I guess that's not 4 years from now. How many years?
You know, I'm glad you noticed that. What's even more interesting is a lot of those images were from like 4 years ago. And a lot of them are from Argodesign. And a lot of them were conceptual work, which has turned us into a strategic design partner with Magic Leap. Right now, we're in a gap. And I bet you can guess what that gap is. We're in the gap between the Creators Edition being released and everyone finishing up their code and releasing their experiences. So I did my best to try and teach what will be coming without giving away people's development paths, which would be unkind. They deserve their announcements. So that's one of the things you saw there. A lot of what you saw was actually done with projection, which is very interesting. And when Omar was talking about Magicverse and different layers, that's an important thing to recognize, that you're going to have high fidelity and low fidelity devices here all peering into the same integrated reality. I hope that's a good enough answer for you. We tried to be honest in the presentation, and it was either obviously a demo, so we didn't write demo, or it says demo. A second thing is we're still working on how to get stuff off the device in a way that looks as good as it does on device, which is almost impossible. And you see even some of the videos I have there that were well produced with a professional company. That's like a sliver of what it's like to be on device and see it integrated in the reality. So sometimes you just end up going to a lot of comps.
All right,
we had someone over
next?
here that had a question.
Who was the person?
This woman right here.
Wait, so you've got to hold your hand up. That's going to help matters. Oh, okay, hold on. I'll hold the mic.
Oh, hi, I'm Melissa. So as a mom of 5, I have a question about this virtual reality gaming thing that you're showing. And here's my question. So if you think about stories traditionally and the role they played for children, they were entertaining, but they also had a much greater utility. They were supposed to teach children larger things about the human experience. Maybe they had morals, parables, and if for nothing else, to help them understand themselves more and relate better to others. So now we look at what's happening with kids, and everyone's saying they're way too much on phones. Gaming is here to stay. Technology is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So my question for you as an entrepreneur is, how are you guys going to bridge this gap? How does me being able to like wave a fish around my living room, or my child to be able to do that, teach them something greater about how they're going to connect to other human beings and understand themselves? You know, is there language? Is there character development?
Sorry.
Yeah, that's a very good question. A lot of that will be up to the content developers, but I wanted to hit on one of the things that you said there, because I do have an 8-year-old son, and I'm one of the rare parents out there who's been able to compare screen times here. He's like a star at school because he gets to wear this thing and play on it all the time, and gets to see all the games when they first come out. When I interrupt my son on his screen device, he gets very angry and very frustrated at me. He's 8 years old. He's at that age. When I interrupt him when he's on the device, it's really interesting. He just looks over, acknowledges me, and goes back to playing. And I don't have any scientific data on this, but I think it's because he is more present in the room with me, and the content is in the room with me. So he doesn't feel this like anxiety response that if he looks away, it goes away and ceases existing. So he just looks at me, he interacts with me, and then he goes back to playing. It's really interesting. So I think if the content providers, like you were alluding to, can back up that message with really good, powerful content, I think it'll be a very valuable thing in education. I think we'll find that these are really an interesting device to have children in, as opposed to strict screens. Only anecdotal evidence for now, but I'm hopeful. We got 6 more minutes, so there's a hand here.
Okay, good. Ooh,
I can't see to the back, so you'll have to wave your hand if you want.
Yeah. Hi, sticking to the off-device story, since we do have native apps, but we don't have devices, right? And the technology could be 3-4 years, let's say, when we have devices all over. So is there a hack, let's say, if you have scanning a QR code, for example, to make it mass, to bring that device experience into a native app experience? Are we there yet, or do you think that use case may or may not exist?
Well, that's an interesting question. How close are we to when the lower fidelity devices could appear? And certainly as a product designer, I could imagine interfaces that could get you there as a user very easily. But what are you going there for, and how will it look? Well, I think we've all seen ARKit, and we can know, okay, that's not the same as mixed reality, but it ain't bad either. And so I think when you look at it that way, you're like, yeah, if there really was an interface, and then there was a system on the other side, not too much unlike the internet, that could connect you with certain files and a certain rendering, a resolver of some sort, that this could all start coming together where we all could be participating in a lot of ways. I would even maybe call those portals. Omar talked about a magic verse, and it's quite possible there'll be a lot of different portals into that magic verse. I think we can imagine it happening. But it's got some infrastructure pieces to come together.
All right, who else?
There was someone right back here that had their hand up. Yes, that gentleman there in the suit. And
Congratulations for your presentation, sir. What is your feeling about this digital life? Where are we going? Because as many things are appearing in the world right now, like cell phones, everything is digital. And where is the intelligence? Where will we go?
okay, so that's an interesting question. It's a philosophical question. Where are we going with all of this? And I think generally we have a worry together that have we reached peak technology? Like we're looking at the things coming out. I would define peak technology to be this moment at which half of what comes out in a year, half of what's announced at a conference like this, does nothing to advance humanity. Once we've reached that, we've reached peak technology, it could just level out. And from then on, there's one of two things that's gonna happen. I'll be equally philosophical here. One is either technology can continue to serve itself. Much of what's on our smartphones today exists simply for the computer to engage us for itself. Or we're going to take control of it. We're going to decide that technology should serve to create an abundance and should serve to only augment, not emulate humanity, in which case that we can continue on a rising curve of technology improving humanity, and technology can exist in service to us. That includes all technologies, including artificial intelligence. One of the reasons I like this device so much, because that's my own personal philosophy, and I call it technophilia, or a love of technology that's equal to the love of humanity, is that it actually does augment the human, and it doesn't seek to emulate or replace them. So in a lot of ways, it's a lot more of a human form factor. So I'm not one that subscribes to the notion that all technologies should go away, but I am one that shares the concern I heard in your voice that we need to start guiding technology towards a path where it's in service of humanity and isn't just taking off on its own course in some sort of specious way. I'm speaking on that topic at South by Southwest. You can probably get it streaming, and sorry to announce a competing conference at this conference, but they're on completely different continents, right? Okay, any more questions before see me afterwards if you want more than that. Find me for a place that's like a beer. I want to make sure any of the women in the room that want to answer a question can raise their hand, otherwise I'll go to this gentleman here. All right, this guy here, and then maybe time. We got 2 more minutes, so we probably have time for 2 more questions.
And by the way, guys, can we have a round of applause for the idea that technology should serve humans, and that we don't destroy humanity, and that we actually think about that because it's really important.
Yeah, and if anyone's read The Dark Forest by Cixin Liu, and you had a very different reaction to a Tesla getting launched into space, then that's that's a science fiction book joke.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for the talk. It was really amazing. I was wondering, because for this to be really adopted by the masses, there's like a milestone really important that normally is not addressed. That is how a wearable looks on you. Like it becomes a fashion item, right? Google Glasses didn't really make it part of that reason. What are projects or solutions that we can work around for this specific subject of it being kind of a fashion item as well?
Right. So first of all, I would sense 2 questions there. He asked about the fashion of the device, right? First of all, let me nerd out for a second here, because Gary Natsumi, who did the industrial design for this device, first in full disclosure, me and him worked at Frog together in 2001 and 2002, many moons ago. I really like the industrial design of the Magic Leap 1, but I also acknowledge that it's a creator's edition, and it plays that role very well. And as far as developer kits go, I don't know that I can't list too many that have been as consumer ready as that developer kit. What I really like about it is it's very apparent in its surfacing and materials. In other words, instead of trying to hide all the equipment behind fashion, it's just thinly made apparent there, and then the radiuses on it are gorgeous. But the second part of your question is like, okay, so you think that, Jared, and you're an industrial design nerd, and you can look at products very differently than a lot of other people who are just going to look at them as fashion accessories. I think hidden in your question is there a technological path that will either miniaturize this to a point to where it can become more commonly like the type of fashion accessories we will wear. And for that, I would just have to say, stay tuned.
Right. What do you mean by it's got gorgeous radiuses?
Look at the light pack and the circle the buttons, the circle the touchpad, all of it together, and then look at the gentleness of the radius on the control that you hold in your hand, and look how those radiuses also match the sweeps and the radiuses put around the cameras on the headpiece as well. And it's all done in a lovely matte black, so it doesn't pick up all these kind of shines to create curves that aren't actually there in the device and to be like all sparkly. It's just really exquisite stuff, and I think Gary just did a really good job at it. And I can't wait to see what's going to come next and next after that.
Great. I had no idea what lovely radiuses meant, but I'm glad that you told me.
So the radius would be the
the
sweeping curves,
Yeah.
the curves, and the arc of that curve measured in degrees.
Do we have time for one more? No, we don't have time for one more question.
It's counting up now, which means we're over, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Feel free to find me out in the hall, and I'll
Guys, give it
talk
up
to you
for
as long as you
Jared
need.
Ficklin!